Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Yogesh Chavda. I am the founder of Y2S Consulting, and I'm also the director of the Marketing Center at the University of South Carolina's Business School. And I'm also the host of this podcast called Next Frontier in Insights. Today, I am so delighted to have Elizabeth Oates here. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome, awesome. And am I frozen right now? Is that what's happening?
You look a little frozen to me, but I can hear you great.
So let's try again. Um, let's see what happens. Is my laptop working? Can you hear me at least?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's
I
something
can't
going
see
on
you,
with.
but I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, there's something going on that's really weird with my video. So I'm going to first start off by asking you a question, which is tell
Sure.
me a little bit about your background. What got you into insights? Tell me about your journey first and foremost.
Sure. So I've been in the insights function for just over 20 years, and I came into this role because of curiosity. To be honest, it was really about understanding people and understanding their behavior, and that made my job really fun because I found a job where I got to do exactly that. So I've been in the insights side of the business, like I said, for quite a few years, and crossing financial services, CPG and retail. So I've been, General Mills and Kohl's and Ulta Beauty. But within that, and we'll talk about it today, I'm sure. I picked up some of my experiences and wrote them down, and I'm now spending time helping others move to be impactful in their insights based on a book I've just written called More Than Just Interesting. And I think your first question for me, and I can keep going if that's helpful.
Yeah,
Um,
you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to actually leave the session and come back,
okay,
join back in because I think there's a video issue going on my side. But
okay,
what I would love for you to talk about while I'm getting my technical things sorted out is tell me about what inspired you to write the book and what's your book about. And I'll be right
sure.
back.
Absolutely. I can do that. So, the inspiration for the writing of More Than Just Interesting, really for me, came from a desire to bridge the gap between consumer insights and actionable business decisions. Throughout my career, I noticed that while insights teams often generate valuable data, the connection to impactful actions was sometimes missing. So, for me, one real, true, and very personal experience stands out in mind. And here it is, Yogesh. Here's the real truth. I was leaving a meeting from which I had just delivered what I thought was an incredible presentation, right? I was like patting myself on the back. And as the group was leaving the room, one of my stakeholders stopped me and said, Elizabeth, well, that was really interesting. And that was the moment because I thought to myself, no, I failed. I failed because I was not here to be interesting. I'm here to push our business forward. And so I had failed to be that springboard to action. And that was the moment where I was like, I will never be interesting ever again. Or at least not only interesting. How about that? So,
Yeah.
with the book, I wanted to create a guide that really equips insights professionals with the framework to ensure that their insights really do drive tangible results.
Mhm,
And the book, you asked who it's for, is for insights professionals, of course,
mhm,
business leaders also, and really anyone aiming to either build or refine an insights function within their organization.
mhm,
It's also, I think, really valuable for cross functional teams who rely on consumer insights to inform their strategies.
mhm.
And it's meant to be a book that you read, that you take notes in, and that you keep in your briefcase or your backpack. Like the insights team isn't here to write these beautiful decks that get put on binders and shelves. And so I hope this book is just like that, where it's not put on a shelf either.
I totally understand that. So, it's funny that you start with the word interesting because in the P&G world, we would use the phrase nice to know versus actionable
Yes,
insights. Right?
yes.
And, if it's nice to know, why are you doing the research? Would be the question that we would always be asking, our stakeholders.
Yes,
So
that resonates.
completely right. So, when you had that experience with the stakeholder who said, "Hey, it's interesting," you had to almost unpack what that actually meant for yourself, I would imagine, right?
Yes, yes.
So
And
tell me more
yeah,
about that. Yeah.
and unpack what it meant was like, why was this nice to know? And I like those words as well,
Yeah.
because I really wanted it to be that thing that was the springboard to doing something, to making a decision or taking an action. And
Mhm.
that was the part that was missing. And
Mhm.
so it's kind of been a life mission since then to always be the springboard, be the link, be the bridge to action.
Completely understand that. I totally get that. So, in a way, when a company is becoming consumer centric and they want to have that that high level of empathy for their target audience and so on and so forth,
Mhm.
there's some foundational steps that you have to take, I would imagine, right? So talk to me about, and again,
Yes.
it's connecting back to your book. So I would just kind of like unpack this. Tell me, what are those foundational steps for achieving this for you?
Yeah, I love this. And let me start with how I define consumer centricity, because
Yeah,
for
let's go
me,
with that.
that
Yeah.
definition is really important. And I want my stakeholders to know what I'm here to do. So I'll start there. I define consumer centricity as two things. One is how an organization makes decisions with consumers in mind,
Hmm.
and how an organization brings its goods or services and messages to life for consumers. And those two things can happen whether or not a consumer realizes that they're happening. It's
Hmm.
really the lifeblood of the organization, and are the consumers the heartbeat that are helping us make those choices. So
Hmm.
you asked about getting there, right? So I think
Yeah.
there's a couple of things that insights teams can do in order to achieve that status of like, yeah, we're consumer centric. And one is really embedding consumer needs into the decision making process. So
Mhm.
we need to ensure that like really every decision considers what's best for the consumers alongside the business, right? We can't go all the way one way or the other. We have
Yeah.
to figure out where that meeting point is, and that really is about creating alignment across teams on
Mhm.
what consumer centricity means for your organization and how you're going to do that. So
Mhm.
embedding again in the consumer needs into the decision making process. The second piece is really about developing a culture of action, right? So not only do we want to act, we need to actually go do it.
Right. Right.
And so, insight should lead to actionable steps. We really need to prepare teams to overcome barriers to action by
Mhm.
really fostering this cross-functional collaboration and ensuring it's clear that what actions are going to be taken
Mhm.
before we go ahead and do the insights. What are we going to do? What's our knowledge gap and what are we trying to do?
Mhm.
And then go figure out how to fill that knowledge gap.
Absolutely amazing. So, did you? Every company is different. Every company has their way of creating that kind of conversation with your stakeholders.
Yeah.
Did you have, in your experience, any kind of like documentation that you used as a way to capture those kinds of steps, or was it just a conversational thing that you were doing with your stakeholders?
I love this question because it is something that really evolves over time. And you can, in the beginning, if you're at those first stages of creating an insights function, it's kind of helpful to have a documented process, A, to keep yourself accountable, but also then your partners know what to expect, right?
Yeah.
And once you've gotten through that process, you don't necessarily have to keep a formal document,
Mhm.
because they'll know when they come and say, hey, can we do this thing? And you say, well, what action are you trying to take? They'll know that's always going to be your first question. And
Yeah.
then you say, what's the knowledge gap keeping you from taking that action? They're going to know that it's always your second question. So if
Mhm.
it helps at the beginning, create documentation. But as you build that partnership, you won't need it anymore.
Right, right. At P&G, for example, I don't know if they do it anymore or not. I have no idea. But back in the day, we actually had a document called a consumer research proposal.
Okay.
And in that, what we would do is there were like two parts. It was a two-page document for the most part.
Yep.
The first page, on the first half of the page, you had to the brand team or the whoever it was would put on the objective for the research.
Yes.
They would give a background and context to the why they're asking for the research.
Yep.
There was a section for actions to be taken. To your point,
I'm applauding.
yep. And then the last part was success criteria. How
Yeah.
would you evaluate success? So, for example, if you're doing a product test, right, current product versus say a new formulation or something, how do you decide whether the new product is actually beating or meeting, amongst the consumers? So,
Yeah.
and I remember, and then the page two would be like, the methodology and the sample size and the questionnaire and blah blah blah, all the details that insights professionals typically do, right? But what was really amazing was that I can tell you that there were so many times where we would get caught up in the argument around the actions to be taken and the success criteria, because
Awesome.
people would be like, "Oh, I don't want to tie myself to a 5 point significant win for a new product because it might be parity, but I might have some internal advantages. So therefore, we should still allow ourselves to go forward." And we're like, "Oh no, we want to have a 5 point win." So you know,
What I love about that though is like the tie to the action, right? So that you're
yeah,
not wasting your time and your talent and your resources
yeah,
on something that someone's going to go, "Oh, that was interesting." You know
yeah,
that they're going to either make a choice or you're going to say, "I don't recommend that choice." Either
exactly.
way.
Exactly. I can't tell you how many scars I got in arguments with people on that one. Whether it was R&D or with the brand management team. Oh, it used to get pretty
Yeah.
pretty energetic. Let's put it that way.
Knowledge can be fun, but
Exactly.
it's business success is even more fun than that.
I know. I know. So coming back, I'm curious. If you're taking this approach about
Yeah.
actionable insights that drive the business versus the interesting insights that doesn't do anything for you, how do you then measure success for an insights function?
Yes. So measurement is something that we do all the time, right? And
Yeah.
so that was like, oh, how do we measure ourselves?
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
think that the success of an insights function really isn't measured in some of the ways that we typically find easy to measure, like
Hmm.
budgets or size of team. And I think those are actually kind of pitfalls. And while pitfalls are fun to talk about, they're not fun to fall in. So let's start there.
Yeah. Yeah.
One, like I said, is budget. If your budget's getting bigger, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're having more success. You may be getting a bigger budget if you're successful as a business because your company values your work.
Mhm.
But the size of your budget alone cannot be your only sign of success.
Mhm.
What if you're actually very inefficient with your spending? Ugh. So
Mhm.
you wouldn't want to rely on that alone.
Mhm.
The other pitfall that we often find is the size of the team. Like, surely more people will help you do more work. That's something true, but more people doesn't necessarily mean more success either, because if those folks aren't working on the right things, you still won't reach the success of which you're capable. So I
Yeah.
think that we'd want to look at success in a couple of different ways, and I do think that we should have more than one KPI on this view.
Mhm.
And so the first is the extent to which insights drive strategic decisions. So, as an insights leader, can you point to a decision or a set of decisions that
Mhm.
was made based on your insights?
Mhm.
If you can, that's a sign of success. If you can't, and then we
Mhm.
got to we got to rethink how we're doing our work here. Another one could be tangible business results, right? We're
Yes.
here to push the business forward. And
Yep.
so the business should be winning if we're doing our job. Like, are we increasing revenue or gaining market share? And how do we link that to insights? So when
Mhm.
your insights were acted upon, did it move the needle for the business?
Mhm.
That's really important, right? And then I think one that's a little more qualitative about its in nature is the influence and the credibility that the insights team has within the organization. So you can measure that by looking around and saying, are you sitting in the room when executives are building strategy?
Mhm.
Are you on the speed dial
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
your executive team? And so if you're there, awesome, that's a sign of success.
I 100% agree with you. Money and budget, money and people, management are indications of success you could be having, but it's not
Yeah.
really the definition of success. It's really the impact that you're having in either,
Yeah.
ideally driving both the top and the bottom line at the end of the day, right?
100%. I couldn't agree more.
And the hard part, I think, for most insights professionals really is that you're two steps removed from the people who are actually activating the work. So they're the ones who are activating are the ones who typically get the credit, but the,
Yeah.
the strategy and the thinking that went into that activation is actually coming
Yeah.
from the insights folks. And I think there's a bit of an opportunity there for us to kind of like almost toot our own horn a bit to say that, hey, this happened because we had done this work in the first place.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would have done something entirely different. You
And
know?
can I guess, and yes,
Yeah,
and let's get ourselves involved as integral business strategists, right? If
yeah,
my job is to be the voice of our customer, I should be there and speaking up in that voice all the
exactly.
time. And
Hmm.
that's part of that consumer centricity strategy.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. Because if you don't champion that, who else will,
Right. Exactly.
right? So,
Exactly.
yep, I totally get it. So, can you give me an example or a memorable situation that you
Yeah.
faced, where you demonstrated the transformative power of having insights in at the table?
Sure. So, not long, okay, I've had lots of experiences in my career. And not long after I had taken my first manager level job, I found myself leading a team at a national retailer. And I was really eager to help the business succeed. And I received a question from a key marketing stakeholder. And what their question was that analytics was showing there were a significant number of customers lapsing. And in this case, just so everyone's clear, we defined a lapsing customer as someone who had shopped previously, but had not returned in the past 12 months.
Hmm.
And so that was the question, like, why are all of these customers lapsing? And so I set out to understand, what was causing the lack of return, and really to think about how could we get those customers back. So my team actually reached out to lapsing customers and conducted some really deep qual and also quant research. And what we found was that the vast majority of lapsing customers didn't know they were lapsing.
No,
They didn't even
interesting.
know.
Wow.
And so they hadn't purposefully walked away from our brand and our business. Rather, for most customers, there was another retailer that had captured their attention or
Mm.
met their needs. And so we hadn't really done anything wrong, which is kind of good news, but also kind of bad news, right?
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
because we hadn't also done something right. And so this insight completely changed the marketing plan to recapture customers.
Hmm.
And we knew that it meant that we needed to capture attention and mind share if we wanted to capture wallet share. So it was really impactful for the company and for me as well, because it showcased the power of consumer understanding. The data was telling us something, but we needed to know why that was happening, and the why had a real and true role to play for the business. So, adding a coupon or a discount wasn't going to be a way to get mind share and love. It was really, and they don't do the same thing as excitement for new brands or new products. And so I love the work that we came out of this. And it really, from an insight standpoint, was fun because it highlighted that connection between the business and the consumer perception and the best course of action.
Amazing. No, that's a great example because when you think about it, right, in your example, you talked about that you would have naturally gone to coupons and discounts,
Yeah,
right? Wrong. It's the wrong solution for a problem that they didn't really truly understand, and
exactly.
and
Exactly. So we also probably saved the business some profit too, right? You're just giving away to the customers who are already coming. We're not reaching the customers that are not coming.
exactly, right. And that I think is part of the thing that I tell a lot of people is that you have to know what is the problem you're actually solving for, and if you are not clear on the problem, then you're not going to be clear on your answer and
Yeah.
your solution, and you may
Yeah.
have actually the wrong solution in place.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's a great example. I love that. So right now, across the on the client side of insights right now, there's a diversity of situations that are happening, as the large
Mhm.
ones obviously will continue to have an insights function, but for small and medium-sized companies, I'm seeing like this pendulum swing where they hire people, then they don't hire people, and it's just all over the place, right?
Yeah.
But for a company that doesn't have an insights function, but they have a marketing organization or a sales organization, um, and but they need insights, how would they even get started? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. The first thing is that if the company is looking for insights, that's the great first sign, right? It's the sign that we want to be consumer centric. So that's incredible. And creating a function or finding a way to get insights is really a specific action to be consumer centric. So
Yeah,
as you're building out that capability, you really want to start with clarity and focus. And
yeah,
you want to make sure that whatever, to all of the kind of the points that we've been talking about so far, is
yeah.
you understand what you need that function to do in order to drive business action. So you got to look at your organizational goals and
Hmm.
think about what actions you're hoping to take and ask yourself, what knowledge gaps do you need to fill in order to confidently take actions or determine which actions to take. And so by aligning your consumer questions with your organizational goals, you'll guarantee actionability, and that'll give you the ROI that you're looking for on investing in insights. And especially as you're thinking about small and medium-sized businesses, they face a lot of constraints. Well, everyone faces constraints, but especially for small and medium businesses, limited budgets and smaller teams are some of those constraints. And so, to overcome that, there's a couple of things that I think you can do. And first and foremost, as we get back to clarity, I'm also thinking about priority. So if you focus on answering the most impactful questions rather than trying to address everything, that really kind of focuses your prioritization, and it puts you in a position to say, what are the questions that are worth answering?
Hmm.
And that's where you have to start, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
From there, I would say, also you have to foster a culture of collaboration, where insights are shared across teams. And
Hmm.
that really maximizes the value of the insights that you get. You also avoid reinventing the wheel. So you save time and money in that
Of
case. But,
course. Of course.
knowledge is important, and we want to have everyone, having knowledge so that they can make choices that are right for the business and the consumer. And along that same line, as you think about prioritization, are there projects that serve multiple stakeholders? Are there questions that would help both marketing and innovation? And if you can think about the questions that we're solving, where we can collaborate on the data and we can, kind of serve more than one stakeholder,
Mhm.
that's a really great place to invest.
So I love that, and in terms of how to, be focused, how to prioritize, do the
Yeah.
biggest and most impactful things. Totally get that.
Yeah.
But you also need to have stakeholders who are willing to partner with you. Have you come across experiences where you have had different kinds or different profiles of stakeholders? Those who are, the easy one is the ones who are already bought into this kind of stuff. So, they're easy to work with, of course, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But did you ever have a situation where stakeholders are like, yeah, you're there, but I know the business already, and I don't need you to help me tell you, there's nothing you can tell me that I don't already know. Did you ever
Yeah.
have those kinds of experiences?
Whatever do you mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure it happens in every industry.
Yeah.
Um, in retail, it can be really easy for, some parts of the business to go, we know how this runs, stack them high and let them fly, in
Yeah.
terms of what you're going to put in the store. Just put it all out there and customers will come buy it. Don't worry. Why do we got to
Exactly.
ask them what they want?
Yeah.
But you do really, what I found is you can actually change minds and change hearts through advocacy. So if
Mhm.
you can build advocates, folks that who, have worked with your team and found success, if they can be a voice for your team, it
Mhm.
can really help you push your influence in the organization. So
Mhm.
find someone who is a high level who's had success and let them be your voice. And
Mhm.
that, and that'll kind of get your foot in the door with some of those folks who are a little less excited to be, listening to someone else.
I completely agree with you on that. You actually triggered a memory in me from like 2000, I think 10 maybe,
Okay.
where I was working at Amway at the time,
Okay.
and the largest market that we had was actually China, mainland China.
Okay.
That
Yep.
represented 50% of the market in terms of revenue and about 60% of the profit for the company, or something along those lines. I don't remember the details now, but um, the president of the division at the time, for some reason, he took a liking to me, and he insisted that I come to China at least once a quarter to meet and to see the market and to impact the market.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about Asian cultures, as a foreigner, when you're there, everybody keeps quiet, and the most senior most person is the one who does all the talking, right? And one time I was in the room and he starts yelling at me. He invited me to the meeting with his leadership team, and he's yelling at me about some reputation tracking data that I had presented just a few minutes ago, kind of thing.
Okay.
And I'm thinking like what's going on here? Like, why is he yelling at me? But then it the moment he started yelling at me, well, I use the word yell. He was using very like strong language is
Yeah.
probably a better way
Yeah.
of describing it. Um, and the rest of the leadership team started talking, and I was like, what the heck happened here? And then it occurred to me that he did that deliberately just to send a signal to everybody else that I'm one of them, and it's okay to talk in front of Yogesh even though he's a foreigner.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and he basically gave me that seat at the table so that I could influence the entire leadership team with the stuff that I was actually talking about.
What a gift. That's an advocate right there.
Exactly, exactly. So when you talk about advocacy, like, in my career, I've had quite a few of them, you know,
Awesome.
and they're the ones that completely made or, they make or break your experience within that organization at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So
And they can take, I mean, their advocacy can take your team and your insights further faster.
exactly, exactly, because they buy into what you're saying. They trust you in that when you're saying something that it's worth
Hmm.
listening to. Those are the things that's when you really know that you're actually having an impact on the business, when they trust you with your
Yeah.
advice. You know,
And they spend more time on the so what and less time on the what. So
Ex-
the what is important, right? We have to
yeah,
get, good and valuable data and insights.
yeah.
But the so what is where we push the business forward. And so once you kind of build that partnership,
Mhm,
based on trust,
mhm.
you can really spend more time in the so what space.
I used this analogy for a job interview. It actually got me the job, but this president asked me, why should I hire you? And I said to him that, if you watch the Godfather movies, you can remember that there was the consigliere who would whisper into the Godfather's ear, and I said, I want to be your consigliere. If you give me
Oh, I
the
love that.
right? And he started laughing. He and I just cracked up on that, and he says, "Why do you want to be the consigliere?" I said, "Look, you don't have to follow all of my advice. You're the decision maker at the end of the day, but at least give me the chance to give you some advice on the question at hand based on what I'm seeing in the external marketplace and what I'm hearing.
Yes.
If you give me that opportunity, maybe you'll make a better decision."
Right.
And that made the difference in terms of me getting accepted or not into the job, basically.
It
You know,
makes sense. Can I yes and again?
yeah, go for it.
Yes, and it's a partnership that we really have to build between insights and our stakeholders, whether it be brand marketers or merchants or
Yeah.
channels folks. And that trust is important because you know we don't always get to deliver fun news. You
No, we
know,
don't. Yep.
and your partners will really lean in more if you've built a relationship of trust, and they'll lean in more even in the times where you need to give bad news or
Mhm.
unfavorable, results. And so it's important that you have that relationship and that trust and that open ear then.
Yeah, and especially for organizations that are not very big, right? And they
Yeah.
are kind of like trying to, leverage you or maximize your value in a big way. There are problems, right? There's always going to be some challenges that are there. So I'm just curious, what kind of challenges have you seen in that context, if any?
Yeah. In terms of becoming actionable.
In terms of like developing an effective, insights
Oh,
program, and in terms of how, like we talked about trust being a great
yes.
enabler to building up traction, but
Yeah.
there are also some pitfalls or challenges that may be there as well. So what would those be in your mind?
I would think about there's lots of there's lots of ways it could go wrong. No, I'm just, no, it's
Yeah.
it's really about it goes wrong when you haven't communicated clearly, you don't have trust, and you
Mm.
don't have alignment. And
Yeah.
so, in order to kind of remedy those situations, really, I think you have to involve your partners and in leadership also at the beginning of the process. And
Mm.
we really have to create alignment, kind of back to that example you gave about a research brief.
Yeah.
What's the objective we're all trying to achieve?
Mhm.
We're all here to win. We're all on the same team.
Yeah.
What's our desired outcome or action?
Yeah.
And if you can align to that and then say, okay, what do we have to know in order to take that action? It
Mm.
really, it's like the alignment starts from the beginning, as opposed to like, I went out and I did all this work and I come back and now no one's listening. Or you get that, well, it would have been nice to know if. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, that's the other one that's like, oh no, right?
Yeah.
Align up front. And also, that's a moment where you're asking the questions about the business. You can showcase your
Hmm.
business knowledge and your intent to be business first, right? And so your stakeholders and your leaders will get more comfortable with your approach and feel like they have a stake in the process. And it'll also keep your work top of mind, right? So, that last part's important because sometimes, in the good old days, we'd say, awesome, great question. I'll get back to you in 12 weeks. Okay. Well, that doesn't happen anymore, but for lots of reasons. But you have to be top of mind because even if it's a few hours or a few days, right, the business keeps moving. And so we have to be relevant, not only with what we're bringing back, but
Yeah.
when we're bringing back. And then, of course, how we share it with the business. So, that clear, concise communication is really important. And, you have to know your audience. Like that's
Yeah.
part of communication 101. I think you would agree, Yogesh, but
I totally
every
agree.
every person giving a presentation will tell you that because it's true, right?
Yeah.
High level executives, their days are filled from beginning to end, beyond the max, triple booked, all that, right? And so they don't have time or desire to really like dig through that beautiful 60-page report that you put together, right? You'll actually discredit yourself if you do that, or
Yeah.
if you give like a lengthy, windy, presentation. Okay,
Mhm.
those are fun to give. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But again, business success is even more fun than that. So, so don't do
Exactly.
it. You know, uh,
I have another phrase for that, Elizabeth. It's called death by data.
ooh, uh, I was like, that sounds very accurate.
Yeah, like I can't tell you. I'm sure you face this. I've faced this. When vendors come in and present, like 100 slide deck in 60 minutes. It's like,
Yes,
what did you expect me to remember at the end of 60 minutes? Like, I don't remember anything. It's like mind
yes,
numbing.
yes. Right.
So
Exactly. We're like, what's that thing that's going to make us do something? And death by data is not going to help us do anything.
exactly. Exactly. What is your strategy for having compelling communication? If it's whether it's a presentation or
Yeah,
other mechanisms that you use. What have you been? How do you go about doing it? Just give us a
sure.
sense of that.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but it kind of all goes back to that upfront alignment, right?
Hmm.
So if you've done that alignment, you
Yeah.
know what the business objective is, and
Hmm.
so as you come back and share what you've learned from a
Yeah.
consumer standpoint, it has to be pointed exactly at that business objective.
Hmm.
Everything else is just interesting.
Yeah.
So
Of course.
focus there,
Yeah.
and that and become that springboard. Give yourself the litmus test of, is this something that's going to make someone make a decision or at least change their mind about something?
Hmm.
Or is this just interesting?
Yeah.
And going through and sifting through your information will help you avoid death by data.
Yeah, I agree with that. You bring it back to the objective and also bring it back to the actions to be taken, right?
Yes.
So, if there are two or three different options, make the case with the data that you've collected as, is option A
Yeah.
better than B versus C? Or is there actually another option that's emerging from the analysis that you've done, which may be
Yes.
option D or E that
Yes.
they have not considered before?
Right. Again, we're all here to push the business forward. And no
Exactly.
matter how we do it, my role is to tell you which of those is the best way. And here's why. So let's focus on that.
Exactly. It totally makes sense. Now, when you were writing this book and when you were thinking through, the content of this book, um, I'm not sure exactly when you started writing the book. Was it pre or during the whole generative AI phenomenon that happened?
I I started writing in January of 2020, Yogesh. It was a 4.5 year passion project.
Oh wow. Okay. So you were at it for quite some time. So now
I
with AI,
was.
now that you are somewhat familiar with what's happening with ChatGPT and all the other generative
Yeah.
AI tools that are out there, as you think about the content of your book,
Yeah.
how do you feel that AI is impacting that now, if in any way?
AI is a yes and. to everything in the book, right?
Mhm.
And I think there's been always this fear of AI or Gen AI is gonna replace something about
Mhm.
insights. I
Mhm.
would challenge us to say it's going to help us evolve to be even more impactful and effective in our work, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that AI can really complement the principles, whether it be automating data collection or enabling teams to focus more on the strategy and the interpretation, right? For
Mhm.
example, AI can identify patterns in consumer behavior, but human insights professionals are needed to really contextualize the findings and tie them to actionable business strategy.
Mhm.
Okay, and just for a moment to laugh here, I was thinking about this, like what point in my career or what activity would I be like, you can have that one AI. Because I want to do something else that's more impactful. And so, I think about, data summary. AI can help us read and analyze and
Mhm.
report,
Mhm.
even when we have mountains of data. So
Mhm.
early in my career, I was a kind of an analyst level insights professional and doing volume estimation work. And I would print out hundreds and hundreds of open-ended comments.
Oh my
Then
gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
I would get a series of highlighters and
Mhm.
really start sorting through and quantifying the insights by, taking a highlighter for every kind of bucket of comment, right? It
Yeah.
would take me days.
Yep.
And that days can now be done in minutes, if
Yep.
even that long, right? So I am so glad that no analyst is ever going to have to get those highlighters out again, so
Mhm.
it will allow them to spend their time on the so what instead of just the what. And so the only thing I think that's bad about that is it's bad for the highlighter industry.
Yeah. They can find a different use case, I'm sure. But
True, true. Yes, yes. So,
you know.
I do think it's a yes
Mm.
and we've been evolving, as a function,
Mhm.
and I think that this is a really kind of a way to continue that
Mhm.
evolution. Even if you look back not that long ago, we were the market research function, and that was really about like the doing of the research. We evolved into calling ourselves something more like consumer insights. And
Mhm.
I think that that evolution was a showcase of the role we were playing for our organizations. Now,
Mhm.
so I think AI will help us continue to evolve. And
Yep.
I'm going to get radical. Can I get radical for a second?
Go for it.
I'm going to change our name again.
Okay, let's hear it.
I think, could we be something more like human centricity professionals?
Hmm. Okay.
Maybe I got to work on that. Clearly, I'm not in marketing, but the idea, is like really what's the human side of the insight, and how are we applying it to the business, and how we want to leverage AI to help us do that even better.
So, interesting you bring that up because I don't know if you heard yesterday, OpenAI launched something called Operator on ChatGPT.
Yes, yes.
Did you see that? Okay.
Yeah, and I saw a few screenshots of it doing things, operating.
Yeah. One of the hot topics this year is agentic models, and this is OpenAI's first, a step in that direction, where not only will it do any kind of analysis that you ask it to do, but it'll actually take it to the next step of actually doing things for you. So the it's not,
Cool.
so like let's say for example, if you were to say to OpenAI, I'm going to Italy, specifically in Rome, from say July 1st to July 7th. I want to do these three or four things. Give me an itinerary. It'll
Yeah,
define the itinerary for you, but then it'll ask prompt you and say, do you want me to make the reservations for you as well?
yeah,
Right? And it'll do the reservations for you. Now, if you think about what I just said in that example, right? What happens to the path to purchase for brands that would be offering their services there if OpenAI's ChatGPT does not pick up that brand in
interesting.
in
Yeah,
that, then has the path to purchase actually shortened for those brands that are actually in the mix? And what happens to those brands that are not in the mix
right,
in the algorithm,
right. Well,
right?
we've been in everything is new, but in
Yeah.
a similar newness, as we're talking about social media. just not too long ago, right?
Yeah.
What's going to happen if we're not in the conversation, and how are we counting conversations? And we spent a lot of time, looking at how do we get in the mix there. I think that this is another way that we have to think about putting ourselves in the right place at the right time. And if we're using something like Operator for helping us do our jobs, are we making sure that we've tested to say what are all of the scenarios that we should be looking at? What are we missing out on if we take this action? But really thinking back to what's the human element. And what I like about that idea is pushing from data to action really quickly. Maybe we could also be inspired.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, for brands in particular, I actually did a post last night about this, is that
Yeah,
brands will need to rethink how are they going to put themselves into the mix. And I
yeah,
think this is where, again, insights professionals have to think about, okay, you're right. There's a human part to it in terms of how are people contextualizing their problems that they're putting into these kinds of AI tools, right?
yep,
We need to know how that happens,
yeah,
right? So there's a consumer human intelligence input that we can provide, right? That's one part.
yes,
But the second part, I think, is that from an algorithmic perspective, what do we have to do to make sure our brand pops up in the list?
yeah, yeah,
And we have to also provide that kind of thinking, because if you think about category entry points, and we talk about salience and the fact that your memory has to remember the brand at the point of purchase,
yeah.
now that's become an algorithm through ChatGPT in a way.
Is this a new mind share?
It might be. It just might be. Look, this is 24 hours old, right? So I'm also thinking this through, but it's
Hot
there's a
off the press.
yeah, this is a game changer, right? So I
Yeah,
think, with people like you and others, who have a depth of experience in terms of understanding humans and doing consumer understanding, we got to rethink how and what are we actually going to be researching in the future
yeah,
as these kinds of tools become more and more prevalent, basically.
yeah, yeah. Agree.
You know,
I'm like excited and terrified all at the same time. Can I be both of those things?
yeah, you can both features can coexist. We say that to our kids all
Yeah.
the time, right? So
Yes, it's real. It's real and true.
exactly, exactly. So in that context, like the example we just walked through about the operator thing, right?
Yeah,
There's a balance of human intuition and judgment with all this AI stuff, right?
yeah,
How have you been approaching that? So, I talked about this situation, but like, if you were to face this as a challenge, let's say if you were doing something as a consulting project or working
yeah.
for another organization, whatever it may be, if I'm putting you on the spot here, but how would you approach that problem if you were put in that shoes?
The balance for, I think, leveraging AI for efficiency happens when we also ensure that there's human oversight and intuition in the context of it all. So,
Mm.
AI excels at and is better than Elizabeth at faster and at processing large data sets. But I also believe that human judgment
Mhm.
is crucial for interpreting nuances,
Yeah.
thinking about ethical considerations,
Mhm.
and aligning the findings with the business objectives, right? So
Mhm.
both on the input and the output end, we can have a role to play. And I think AI will help us, spend more time doing only the things that humans can do. So
Right.
I'm really excited for AI to help us make our work more efficient.
Mhm.
And heck, maybe I'm also a little excited because I'm okay with letting AI, do routine or mundane things, and I
Mhm.
get to do all the fun things. I'm going to save those.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
AI is not taking that trip. I'm still going on the trip.
Exactly. Exactly right. That's exactly right. So tell me, as you're thinking about, let's, you and I take a step back, a little bit and say, looking at the industry overall and the
Yeah.
professionals that are there, with all this AI stuff going on, you're right. People are nervous, people are worried, some people
Mhm.
are excited. What would be your guidance to people, in terms of how they should frame this in their minds, in terms of
Yeah.
what's coming over the next several years, so to speak?
Yeah. I think that the role of insights professionals is going to continue to shift towards being strategic advisors.
Hmm.
It's going to be less about the skills to become a great insights professional are going to be less about going and collecting or analyzing and more about focusing on how do we impact the business given this insight, right? So I think that we can, really focus on things like critical thinking, creative problem solving,
Mhm.
fostering collaboration across teams to really kind of set up our organizations to be consumer centric.
Mhm.
Those are things that I can't have a large language model do for me. And so I still need to make those things happen. So, but again, back to this idea of evolution. This isn't the first evolution our industries had to take. I've also worked in a phone calling center when
Oh,
we did our surveys via phone, and we tried to call just before dinner time so we didn't interrupt. But so
yeah,
evolution happens.
yeah.
And like I said, we've even rebranded ourselves to really reflect our evolution. So
Mhm.
I think all of that going forward, we still have to be business professionals first. And
Mhm.
that means that we have the opportunity and the obligation to push our businesses forward.
Mhm.
And we can't be merely interesting. And none of that is new. Um, but I'm really passionate about it. Can you tell? I think the
Yeah.
other thing is that we also need to make sure that the voice of the human,
Mhm.
whether it's things that are said or unsaid, is in our insights. And so our job is to really ask questions with a human lens and make sure that that human is behind the choice that we make. We got to innovate for humans. Not
Mhm.
just for shoppers, right?
Yeah.
I come from the retail, so it's like, what's the shopper doing? Well, what's
Yeah.
the human
Yeah.
doing? And AI should be a great springboard for us. And it could be something, it could be a springboard, or it could degrade our industry. So I'm going to go for the springboard route, and just say, like, let's let AI help us do our jobs more efficiently and more effectively, and focus our time on the things that only humans can do and also are a lot of fun.
Exactly. I totally love that. I totally love that. So, as you talked through a lot of the stuff that you have written in the book, right?
Yeah.
And this is amazing that you've been so gracious in sharing your wisdom here. If there was one message that you would hope that your readers would take away from your book, what would that be?
Insights are only as valuable as the actions they inspire. Period.
Wow.
The goal isn't to be just interesting, but to drive meaningful, consumer centric business decisions to have a lasting impact.
Right. Wow. That's very profound. That's amazing. So, with that said, as you're looking at yourself, what's next for you?
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking. Yogesh,
Yeah.
I'm excited to continue working on initiatives that bridge insights and action.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I've noticed for many, especially we talked about them earlier, small and medium sized businesses,
Yeah.
is that they don't have insights based training.
Mhm.
So as you're thinking about what are you going to do and improve for yourself in 2025, a lot of organizations don't have something internally to really lean on. So it makes developing those skills to become a really impactful insights professional a bit difficult. So
Yeah.
I'm working to fill that gap in a couple of ways. One of those is I'm building workshops to give insights professionals actionable, tangible skills that they can immediately apply in role to impact their business.
Mhm.
Similarly, the other thing I'm doing is that there isn't a lot of support for
Mhm.
specific insight skills, in terms of evaluating team members or thinking about developing yourself.
Mhm.
So I have 9 core skills for insights, and I've built frameworks to help evaluate yourself or
Mhm.
your team on those skills, and really build individual development plans based on the skills that are specific to our function. And so, even for those who are hoping to grow their functions in 2025, you can use these frameworks for recruiting against those 9 core skills. So, if any of your listeners are interested, they can find me on LinkedIn and reach out, and I'd be happy to talk through how to share
Amazing.
those. So,
Love
but
the plug.
all of that, one thing is for certain, as I share my book and my ideas, it's really honestly been truly, thrilling to see this incredible level of engagement. And, so there is clearly a community of people who are passionate about pushing our industry forward, evolving themselves.
Mhm.
And so together, I think as we head into 2025, I'm ready to say, let's go.
There you go. Let's go. I love that. I love that. So, Elizabeth, this has been
Yes,
amazing. Thank you so much
so much fun. Thank you for
for
having
being
me.
here. I can't believe how quickly the time flew by in this conversation.
It did.
But for everybody who's listening, I would highly, highly encourage you to pick up the book. More than just interesting, How to Build an Insights Function for Impact by Elizabeth Oates. Elizabeth, thank you again for being here. We'll
Thank
be
you.
back in a couple of weeks. I haven't announced yet who's going to be coming, but just stay tuned to my LinkedIn channels, and you will know who I'll be having as my guest in a couple of weeks. Until then, stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.